Good evening, everyone. So we will continue our discussion on ichthyosiform disorders, and this being the Diwali weekend. So I wish everyone who is viewing this video a happy and prosperous and a safe Diwali. Hope you enjoy with your family. Light diyas, no bursting of crackers, please. Trust me, coming from an atopic individual, we would like to breathe cleaner air. So with that, happy Diwali to everyone who is listening to this video. Happy Diwali to all the subscribers, all the people who are with me with this video and all the other videos. And it has been a lovely and mesmerizing journey for the past year and a half that I've been putting videos. And we might have something special in store this week. So that special announcement would be made in the coming week. So without much further ado, I hope you and your family are in prime of their health and make sure you enjoy your Diwali weekend with your loved ones. And may this festival of light be the awesomest and the best for you. So without much further ado, let's start our discussion. So this week we'll be continuing with the part 2 of ichthyosiform disorders. And trust me, I've tried to make it as simpler and as easier to understand as compared to the textbooks. It's a very dry and a very I would say it could be a confusing chapter from the textbooks of dermatology, be it Rooks, Bolognia, or Fitzpatrick. So I've tried to condense everything and make some sense out of it so that it is easier to understand, first of all, and second of all, it should be quite easy to memorize also. So if you make some changes into the way you learn about ichthyosiform disorders, you'll be easily able to remember them. So in the last lecture, last week, we discussed the common ichthyosis and the autosomal recessive congenital ichthyosis. And this part two concerns itself with other disorders, other parts of autosomal recessive congenital ichthyosis. Now, I would like you to just go through this video slowly along with me and let me explain to you a little bit about the rarer disorders of ichthyosis. So the last lecture was very important from residency point of view. Those are the ichthyosis or ichthyosiform disorders that everyone should know in details. In fact, you should learn more about these disorders and learn more about how to manage these disorders. The current video concerns itself with some rarer variants of these disorders and how to recognize them clinically. Okay, and these kind of disorders is what makes you a special or a different dermatologist from others. Okay, you don't have to do the bare minimum. You have to do at least 10 steps ahead of the bare minimum. Okay, you have to have some extra knowledge, some extra key points, and that is what makes you separate from other dermatologists. So go through this video and let me guide you towards the part 2 of ichthyosiform disorders, the keratinopathic ichthyosis and erythrokeratodermas. Okay, so without much further ado, let's start our discussion on ichthyosiform disorders part 2. Hmm. In keratinopathic ichthyosis, as the name suggests, the pathology lies in the keratin genes. Okay, we have learned in the past that in the last lecture, Ichthyosis vulgaris was because of filaggrin mutation. Okay, X-linked ichthyosis was because of steroid sulfatase mutation. Autosomal recessive mutations had problems in the keratin or the connexins or the lamellar body genes, isn't it? Now the problem lies in the keratin genes. And we know from our previous lectures on epidermolysis bullosa that mutations in the keratin gene can lead to skin splitting. Okay, but if the keratin is mutated, the keratin also loses its other functions, mainly adhesion between the cells, attachment between the cells. And when the attachment is defective, you have scaly lesions also. So what we are going to deal with is epidermolysis. Epidermolysis, that means split between the epidermis, and adhesion disorders. Adhesion disorders. And this adhesion disorders leads to scales. So in this keratinopathic ichthyosis, you have epidermolysis, and that is why it is also known as epidermolytic ichthyosis. or epidermolytic ichthyosiform disorders. Now, as I've said that there is epidermolysis, in biopsy you will find epidermolytic hyperkeratosis. Okay, so go back and see a lecture on histology of epidermis and you will understand what we mean by epidermolytic hyperkeratosis. Okay, so in keratinopathic ichthyosis, the defect lies in the keratin genes and this leads to defective function and adhesions. Okay, it's an extremely variable phenotype because there are a lot of keratin genes. We have learned in our discussion on epidermolysis bullosa and on our discussion on basement membrane zone and the keratinization that so many keratin genes are implicated. Okay, so any mutation, any kind of mutation in those keratin genes will lead to epidermolytic ichthyosis depending on which part of keratin gene gets mutated. We'll come to that, don't worry. Here we have background erythema. Why? Because the adhesion is also defective and these are rarer disorders. So you may not see them quite frequently. In fact, you will see, let's say, 2-3 disorders in your life, maybe, if you're not in a tertiary care center. Okay, but we need to recognize them and we need to understand them from theoretical point of view. Let's move forward. So look at this classification system. This is the same system that we had discussed last week while discussing the commoner ones. And there we had discussed Ichthyosis vulgaris, recessive X-linked ichthyosis, and autosomal recessive congenital ichthyosis. Now it is very important to divide ichthyosiform disorders in non-syndromic and syndromic. A part of non-syndromic is the common ichthyosis, which includes Ichthyosis vulgaris and XLRI. Now we'll come into autosomal recessive congenital ichthyosis. These were harlequin, collodion baby, bathing suit, and lamellar ichthyosis or CIE, congenital ichthyosiform erythroderma. So we have discussed this. We will be tackling syndromic ichthyosis in part 3 of the video, so I've kept that separate. In this video, we'll focus more on keratinopathic ichthyosis, epidermolytic ichthyosis, and erythrokeratodermas. Let's move forward. So this will be our area of discussion now. Keratinopathic, erythrodermic ichthyosis, and other non-syndromic ichthyosis. Let's start our discussion. We'll discuss first keratinopathic ichthyosis. Clear? Let's start with it. In keratinopathic ichthyosis, the defect lies in the keratin gene. We have discussed that. It's a very severe form of ichthyosis with ultra rare cornification disorder. That is what we call this group of disorders because they are rarer. There is background erythroderma, scales and erosions. We know whenever keratin is mutated, we have this kind of erythema and this kind of defective gene adhesions. We have seen the same in epidermolysis bullosa group of disorders, didn't we? The mutation lies in one of the keratin genes. About more than 75% cases have de novo mutations. That means newer mutations. Let's move forward. Most of the keratin which is effective is keratin 1, 10 or 2. And these are the keratins which are very superficial. We know that in the base of the epidermis, you have keratin 5 and 14. If you want to know more about it, go see our discussion on keratinization and our video on epidermolysis bullosa group of disorders. You will have a better understanding. Now, keratin 1 and 10 are the major keratins in the superficial layers, in the upper layers of epidermis. Keratin 2 also lies in the superficial layer. So these mutations leads to epidermolytic hyperkeratosis on biopsy. So this is the biopsy reaction pattern. And to understand this, you can go back and see our lecture on histology of epidermis. Okay. Now, when the keratin is mutated, it misfolds. That means it is not able to fold properly. And all this misfolded keratin gets accumulated in the form of keratin aggregates. And these aggregates activate MAP kinases, molecular chaperones like HSP70, ubiquitin proteasome system, all of these systems which are responsible for destruction of wrongly folded keratin, these systems get activated. And the driver of these kind of systems is inflammation. So this leads to inflammatory changes, and because of this inflammatory changes, you have the background erythema. So a protein which was supposed to form properly does not get formed properly and is misfolded. In order to take care of that misfolded protein, a lot of problems start happening in the cell and there is inflammation which leads to erythema. So now we can understand why the keratin mutation leads to scales and erythema now. Now it can be autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, or even semi-dominant. Okay, that is why it is separate from autosomal recessive congenital ichthyosis. Let's move forward. We'll start with the first group of disorder, which is epidermolytic ichthyosis. It is also known as epidermolytic hyperkeratosis or bullous CIE or ichthyosis type of Brock or ichthyosis type Brock. Okay, so this could be a good quiz question. Ichthyosis type Brock is another name for which type of ichthyosis? It is epidermolytic ichthyosis. Now remember that CIE in the last lecture was not bullous. So if you see CIE with bullous lesions, think of epidermolytic ichthyosis. Clear? It is also known as burnt child or infant brûlé. Infant brûlé is nothing but the French term of a burnt child. Okay, so burnt child in French is known as enfant. Actually, it's pronounced as enfant brûlé in French. So at the time of birth, you have features of congenital Ichthyosiform erythroderma, but there is marked blistering, and this is what separates it from other ichthyoses. Marked blistering is there in epidermolytic ichthyosis. Remember, epidermis is lytic, that means it is separating. And what happens when epidermis separates? It forms a blister. Let's move forward. In first months of life, you have blistering, and eventually this blistering leads to hyperkeratosis, but the skin fragility remains. So can you understand that this is behaving somewhat like an epidermolysis bullosa kind of picture? Okay, but in epidermolysis bullosa, you will not see that much of hyperkeratosis. In epidermolytic ichthyosis, it starts as CIE plus blisters and eventually leads to hyperkeratosis, but the skin remains fragile. During childhood, there is marked keratotic lichenification and rippled keratotic ridges over the axilla and flexural areas. There is a characteristic pungent odor felt, okay, because this epidermis is separating, so it is also getting degraded, and degraded skin has a pungent odor, and that is what we see in epidermolytic ichthyosis. Let's move forward. Now, disorders like fever, skin infections, high temperature, or summers in which you have high temperature can lead to bouts of blistering. And what are bouts? These are episodic blistering. The child is doing somewhat all right. There is just majorly hyperkeratosis, but during fevers, blistering starts. And these bouts are because of fever, infections, high temperature, etc. Itching is there, even urticarial lesions can be there, and these urticarial lesions may also blister. Spiny hyperkeratosis, this kind of spine-like hyperkeratosis can be seen over knees and legs. Now, two mutations are implicated in epidermolytic ichthyosis, keratin 1 and keratin 10. In keratin 1, there is severe palmoplantar involvement. Okay, so much so that walking might be impaired. Clear? In keratin 10 mutation, palms and soles are spared and it responds to retinoids. So these are very important points to remember. Now remember when you say 10, you say it like this, keratin 10. So remember if you want to show your hands, they have to be okay. So in keratin 10, palmoplantar involvement is not seen or at least mildly seen. While in keratin 1, the hand is folded. Why it is folded? Because it is filled with keratoderma, so you are hiding it. So keratin 1 mutation has severe involvement of palmoplantar areas. Clear? Let's move forward. Now this I've taken from Rooks, and you can see that in keratin 1 mutation, this is keratin 1 mutation, you have severe palmoplantar involvement. Look at how much palmoplantar keratoderma you can see. This thickening of palmar skin. You can see spiny keratosis over the knees, over the ankles, over the wrist, over the cubital fossa. Flexors are involved, neck is involved. This kind of thick keratin plates in keratin 1 mutation. Now this is keratin 10 mutation. And you can see that the palmoplantar involvement is either mild or absent. The palms are somewhat okay. There can be palmoplantar involvement, but that's a rare finding in keratin 10 mutation. In keratin 10 mutation, the palms and soles are somewhat spared. But you have this kind of thickening over the flexural areas with background erythema. Clear? Let's move forward. Now, this is a biopsy picture that I've taken from Rooks, and you can see the split within the epidermis in the upper layer. So this from, let me change the color. This is the basal layer, and this is the corneal layer, and you can see the split happening in between these wavy lines. And you can also see the hyperkeratosis. So epidermolytic, epidermis is splitting, and hyperkeratosis. So epidermolytic hyperkeratosis is the biopsy picture in epidermolytic ichthyosis. Clear? Let's move forward. So we have discussed epidermolytic ichthyosis. Now we'll discuss the variants of epidermolytic ichthyosis. The first variant is superficial epidermolytic ichthyosis. Superficial. So it is the blistering happens at a superficial level. This is also known as Ichthyoses bullosa of Siemens, and this is a very important name. Okay, Ichthyoses bullosa. Bullosa means blistering, and Siemens is name of a scientist. Okay, it is because of keratin 2 mutation, and keratin 2 is found in superficial epidermis. So if the keratin 2 is mutated, the problem will be there at the level of superficial epidermis. That is why it is superficial epidermolytic ichthyosis. You understand that now? It is the features are same as epidermolytic ichthyosis, but it's a milder disease, more localized, and keratosis is seen around the navel, over the dorsa of hands, and over the feet and axilla. There are superficially denuded areas, which is known as Mazaron or molting phenomena. Molting is the same like a snake which sheds its skin. That is molting. Okay, or insects that shed their shells are molting. So it looks like the human, the patient is leaving its old skin behind, it's shedding its skin, and that is known as molting phenomena, and molting in German is known as Maserung. So it is Maserung phenomena or molting phenomena, and this term was also given by Siemens, Ichthyosis bullosa of Siemens. So with that, you will easily able to remember that Siemens gave the term molting phenomena. Molting means removal of superficial layer, so it will be seen in superficial epidermolytic ichthyosis. And in order to be superficial, the mutation should be there in keratin 2. Additional features is hypertrichosis. So look at this naval involvement. If it is clear with the current modifications of the picture, you can see that the navel, there is a slight hyperkeratosis around the navel. Okay, there's navel involvement. While if you can appreciate the superficial peeling of skin, okay, superficial peeling of skin, and that is known as molting phenomena. Okay, I'll remove the markings so that you can have a better look. If not, then open Rooks page 63.18 and you will see these pictures. Clear? Let's move forward. Now, the second variant that we'll discuss now is annular epidermolytic ichthyosis. So by annular, we mean ring-like or ring-shaped. So if it is ring-shaped, it will be cyclic epidermolytic ichthyosis, cyclic lesions. The features are same as epidermolytic ichthyosis at birth, and it's again a milder disease. In this annular epidermolytic ichthyosis, you have bouts. Bouts means episodic. So there are episodes of numerous annular, ring-like, and polycyclic hyperkeratotic lesions. Annular hyperkeratotic lesions, especially on trunk and extremities, and these bouts can be precipitated by high temperature, fever, or pregnancy. Okay. So look at this picture, this kind of cyclic lesions, circular. Okay. Cyclic lesions over the flexural areas, trunk and extremities. You have palmoplantar keratoderma. Look at this palmoplantar keratoderma. In fact, here also you can see cyclic lesions over the wrist. You can also see cyclic lesions with scalloped margin or rounded margins over the knees. Look at this cyclic lesion, and in fact, you can look at the superficial removal of skin. The superficial layer of skin is shedding. Okay, so this is I've taken this picture from this article. I'll put the article in the description so you can go ahead and look, you read the full article. Okay, so this is annular epidermolytic ichthyosis, another variant of epidermolytic ichthyosis. Let's move forward. Now, we have discussed epidermolytic ichthyosis and its three variants. Now discuss the second part of keratinopathic ichthyosis, Congenital reticular ichthyosiform erythroderma. Focus on erythroderma. Congenital reticular ichthyosiform erythroderma, or CRY. We are going to say as CRY. It is because again of keratin 10 and keratin 1 mutation. But now the mutation is in some other part of gene, not the same part as epidermolytic ichthyosis. Now, cry is also known as Ichthyoses variegata or Ichthyoses and confetti. Now, confettis are those small thermocol balls that you see in party decorations. Okay, so they are thrown about. They are either thermocol balls or pieces of paper that is thrown together in celebration, and those are confetti. So remember that name. That cry, congenital reticular ichthyosiform erythroderma, is also known as ichthyosis and confetti. Just remember that name. There is generalized redness and scaling. Okay, so ichthyosiform is done, erythroderma is done, leading to localized spontaneous healing with small pale white spots, and these spots are known as confetti-like spots with size less than 2 centimeter. So what I'm trying to say is, if you let me just say that if this is the trunk of the patient, this whole area would be red, and in between there will be some localized pale or localized, pale areas less than 2 centimeter in diameter of healing, spontaneous healing. So focus on the spontaneous healing aspect. Now, crack happens because of revertant phenotype. Revertant phenotype means that another mutation cancels out the previous mutation. So, in the background skin, you have keratin 10 or 1 mutation, but in some particular areas, the cell mutates again and has somewhat of a normal phenotype. So, this is also known as natural gene therapy because the gene is correcting itself naturally without any intervention from other outside. So that is known as revertant phenotype. It is same as revertant mosaicism that you see in epidermolysis bullosa, spontaneous healing in epidermolysis bullosa. Okay. So let me know if you understand this concept or mention in the comments with the timestamp, and I'll discuss that there. Now this is a severe disease. Any erythroderma is severe. Always remember, any erythroderma in dermatology is severe. It's an emergency. Okay. So severely ill, the child may have failure to thrive. There's prominent PPK, prominent palmoplantar keratosis, hypertrichosis of dorsal limbs, ectropion, short stature, contractural neck deformities. On biopsy, you will see binuclear cells, that means cells with two nuclei, with perinuclear vacuolization, but you will not see keratin aggregates. Remember, in epidermolytic ichthyosis, on electron biopsy, you had keratin aggregates. Here, you will not see keratin aggregates. That is why, because the mutation is different. So look at this picture I've taken from Fitzpatrick 9th edition 799 and Rooks 10th edition 63.18. You can easily see background erythema along with few localized areas of spontaneous healing, and these healed areas are known as confetti-like spots, as if somebody has small pieces of paper have been stuck on the skin, and that is why you have confetti-like lesions with a background of erythema and erythrodermic PPK. I've told you that PPK is a factor in cry, and that is known as congenital retiform ichthyosiform. Congenital reticular ichthyosiform erythroderma. Okay. I hope this has made clear. The picture is quite characteristic. Let's move forward. Now we have discussed epidermolytic ichthyosis. We have discussed we have discussed cry. The third part of epidermolytic disorders or keratinopathic ichthyosis is Ichthyoses Curth-Macklin. Curth-Macklin are names. So remember Curth-Macklin. Now this ichthyosis is also known as Ichthyoses hystrix. And hystrix is a term which has come from Hystrix. And Hystrix is Greek word for porcupine. And I'm going to wait a bit and wait for the porcupine to come. Okay. Now, here he comes. Now, let the porcupine reach. So, porcupine is a rodent. It's a animal from rodent family which has spikes, very hard spikes on its back. And from there, the word hystrix has come, and it is now known as Ichthyoses hystrix. Why Hystrix? Because there are extensive spiny hyperkeratosis like a porcupine in a generalized distribution. Remember this line. This is the pathognomic of Ichthyosiform Curth-Macklin. So Ichthyosiform Curth-Macklin or Ichthyosiform hystrix is a porcupine-like keratinizing disorder in which you have extensive spiny hyperkeratosis like a porcupine. The mutation lies in keratin 1, which is the variable tail domain V2, or keratin 10 end of 2B. So these are the two areas where you have mutation. Now remember, in our discussion on keratinization, we discussed about keratin gene and all the parts of keratin gene. Any mutation in different parts lead to different disorders. So here the mutation is either in the keratin 1 V2 domain or at the end of 2B here, the helix termination motive area. If you want to know more about keratin genes, see our video on keratinization. It will clear a lot of concepts. The biopsy shows perinuclear vacuolization and binucleated cells, but without keratin aggregates. Same as the last disorder, confetti-like ichthyosis. Now, just remember that in a cell you have a nucleus, and the function of keratin filaments is to attach nucleus and other organelles to the cell membrane so that the cell maintains its shape. But what happens if the keratin filaments are not properly formed? If they are not properly formed, they will crumple together, they will clump together. It's like an elastic band which gets broken in between. And whenever a stretched elastic band gets broken, it will crumple together, it will come together. And those are known as keratin aggregates or keratin filaments, also known as tonofilaments. And this is what you see. So in this mutation, the keratin maintains its shape, but the function is not there. So in electron biopsy, you will see shell-like perinuclear arrangement of keratins, and this is what is happening here also. You have accumulation of keratin filaments here, and it becomes a shell-like cover over the nucleus. So shell-like cover as if a porcupine is guarding the nucleus, and you can remember this is seen in porcupine-like ichthyosis or ichthyosis hystrix. One of the very interesting disorders. Okay, let's move forward. So in this picture, which I've taken from Rooks, you can see that this kind of very hard striate keratoderma. Striate means in layer form or linear keratoderma. So shiny, tough skin, hard papular areas, and over the extensors, okay, over the feet, you can see that it is spiny. Okay, look at this area. It is spiny, as if spines are coming out of the body like a porcupine, and that is why it is known as Ichthyosiform Curth-Macklin Hystrix or Hystrix type. I hope now it is clear. This is the third variant of epidermolytic or third type of epidermolytic keratinopathic ichthyosis. Okay, so now we have finished the keratinopathic. We had discussed three keratinopathic disorders: epidermolytic ichthyosis, cry, and Ichthyosis hystrix of Kurth-Macklin. Clear? Only three disorders. We are clear. Let's start the fourth variant of non-syndromic ichthyosis. Let's start with Erythrokeratoderma or Erythrokeratodermia. Now, in Erythrokeratoderma, it's a localized condition with erythema because it's in the name erythro, with hyperkeratosis because it's in the name keratoderma. So kerato means hyperkeratosis, erythro means erythema. And if all three are present, localized condition, that means only a certain part of skin is involved, not the generalized involvement like other ichthyosis, only localized involvement. Localized involvement with erythema with hyperkeratosis, you have erythrokeratoderma or erythrokeratodermia. Let's move forward. Now, the first disorder, and this disorder is very important for exam point of view. It is asked very frequently. Erythrokeratoderma variabilis, also known as variable erythrokeratoderma. Okay, variable. The other name of Erythrokeratoderma variabilis is Mendes de Costa syndrome. Remember this name, important. Other name for EKV or Erythrokeratoderma variabilis is Mendes de Costa syndrome. And to remember is M for Mendes, M for migratory. So the lesions migrate. And C for Costa means cyclic. C for cyclic. They are cyclical in nature. They are circular migrating lesions. Okay. So EKV has migrating polycyclic red lesions which migrates in minutes to hours along with hyperkeratosis. Okay. The mutation is most commonly autosomal dominant, but autosomal recessive mutations are also there. The problem lies in connexins, and connexin proteins are an important part of gap junctions, and these gap junctions regulate the inflow and outflow of water in between the cells. So they are a very important part of aqueous intercellular channels. So you have a cell, and in between you will have connexin attachment. And in this connexin attachment, water flows in between the cells. Okay, so remember connexins are important for water transport. Just remember this. Okay, so let's discuss Erythrokeratoderma variabilis or Mendes-da Costa syndrome. The mutation lies in connexins. You can have mutation in GJB3, which is connexin 31, GJB4, connexin 30, GJA1, connexin 43. Other genes are PERP, TRPM4, KDSI. You need not remember them. Just remember the mutation lies in connexins. Okay, connexins are aqueous channels, water conducting channels. The onset is in infancy and there's variable presentation because the name is variabilis. Okay. Incomplete penetrance, that means even with the same mutation, you may not have 100% of clinical features. You will have some clinical features. Two types have been described in Erythrokeratoderma variabilis. One is in which the lesions are relatively fixed. They are very slowly migrating. Well demarcated keratotic bizarre shaped red plaques over extensors, flanks and buttocks. So slowly migrating well demarcated keratotic red plaques. Okay, so remember keratotic red plaques. Clear? The second type is transient, in which you have red polycyclic or comma shaped macular lesions at any site. So there are macular at any site and polycyclic. So this has keratotic and this has macular area. The treatment is acitretin and even low dose isotretinoin is found to be useful. So this is the picture I've taken from FITS 801 page and Rooks 63.19 page. You can easily appreciate this kind of polycyclic red macular lesions. So these are variable red scales. PPK is a feature. Flexural involvement is a feature, and this picture from Rooks is very pathognomic. This kind of polycyclic lesion, and these lesions change position and shape within minutes to hours, and that is the variable presentation in Erythrokeratoderma variabilis, the first type of Erythrokeratodermas. Let's move forward. The second type is progressive symmetrical erythrokeratoderma. Again, it is a part of erythrokeratoderma, but as the name suggests, it is progressive. Now, in EKV, the lesions were migratory. That means from one place to another. In progressive symmetrical erythrokeratoderma, you have progression. That means only one or few lesions and they will stay at the same place, but they will increase in size. They will be progressive. Okay. The other name for progressive symmetrical erythrokeratoderma is Gottron syndrome. It's a rare variant of EKV and the mutation lies in connexin 30.3. It is also the term for progressive symmetrical erythrokeratoderma and Erythrokeratoderma variabilis is Erythrokeratoderma variabilis progressiva. So this I've used here because Rooks mentioned it. I don't think so it's that important. But we should know that Erythrokeratoderma variabilis progressiva is progressive symmetrical erythrokeratoderma plus Erythrokeratoderma variabilis. If the mutation is in keratin 83 mutation, it leads to a recessive form of progressive symmetric erythrokeratoderma. Okay, that's another point to remember. It's a good point. Uh, let's see if any one of you remember where last we have heard about keratin 83 mutation. I'll give you a hint. It's in the video on keratinization. And I've mentioned one that keratin 83 mutation leads to this disorder. If you know, mention that in the comments. Let me see who's the first to mention. Non-progressive symmetrical erythrokeratoderma, the skin is normal at birth. At infancy, you have large geographical but symmetrical. Okay, because it is symmetrical. That's the name. Symmetrical fine scaly plaques along orange-red skin. The most affected sites are shoulders, cheeks, and buttocks. The lesions are less itchy, non-migratory lesions. Okay, so in EKV, you have lesions number one here, then here, then here. While in progressive symmetrical erythrokeratoderma, you had lesion here, then this, and then this. So it progresses, it increases in size. Topical calcipotriol is found to be useful, that's what Rooks mentioned, but there are multiple other treatment modalities. So look at this picture. The picture is somewhat same as erythrokeratoderma, but the lesions are increasing in size wherever they are. They are not changing places like EKV. Clear? I hope I'm making sense. If not, mention that in the comment section along with the timestamp, and we'll have a discussion there. The third type is symmetrical acrokeratoderma. Acro means over the acral sides, over the hands and feet. This has been found in Chinese population, about 34 cases. Brown to black hyperkeratotic plaques which are symmetrically distributed over acral lesions. It also leads to whitish hyperkeratosis when exposed to water. Remember, mutation in erythrokeratodermas is mainly in the connexin gene. We have told you that. And connexin gene is responsible for creation of aqueous channels. And aqueous channels are responsible for H2O absorption or transportation. We are clear about it? So if there is a defect in transportation channel of water, the water may not be easily able to pass between cell to cell. So when a patient of symmetrical acrokeratoderma immerses their hands in water, the keratin, the misfolded keratin scales become whitish, and that is known as whitish hyperkeratosis over the dorsal hand and fingers. So this hyperkeratosis is similar to what you see in aquagenic keratoderma, but this is a different disorder altogether. We will discuss aqueous keratoderma while we are discussing palmoplantar keratodermas. Okay. There's marked worsening in summers, but improvement in winters because the humidity level increases in summers, and the problem lies in the water channels. So when the humidity increases, the problem increases. So look at this picture which I've taken from this article. I'll mention that in the description. Look at the symmetrical involvement. Symmetrical. Look at the acral involvement. Hands, acral areas like acrofacial vitiligo. And symmetrical acro. So you have symmetrical involvement, you have acral involvement, and you have involvement in the form of keratotic plaques. So symmetrical acrokeratoderma. Let's move forward. So with that, we finish our discussion on part 2 of Ichthyosiform disorders, dealing with epidermolytic or keratinopathic ichthyosis and erythrokeratodermas, along with other disorders which are not there. With that, we have finished all the non-syndromic ichthyoses. The reading recommendations are the chapters in Rooks, Bolognia, and Fitzpatrick, and the individual articles that I've used for taking out pictures. You can go ahead, these are in the description, and you can just go ahead and read the full articles if you want. Let's move forward. Now, with that, we finish our discussion on keratinopathic disorders and erythrokeratodermas. With this, the non-syndromic ichthyosis part of that chapter is complete. I hope I've made things simpler. If you think that now the ichthyosiform disorders, at least the non-syndromic one, are a bit easier to understand, just write in the comments that now it is easy, so that I know that I am trying that what all I have done to make it simpler, that has worked. It is a very dull chapter, but there are no complaints to the authors. They have tried to make it very simpler, but reading it in a book makes it a bit difficult. The classification into different parts is what makes it easier for me to understand and for me to tell others. If you follow this scheme, you'll be easily able to understand these disorders. If you know two or three distinguishing features of every disorder, you will know. I've tried to explain the features, the clinical features of individual disease with the mutations that is implicated in those disorders. And I hope I've made some sense. If you think now the chapter on ichthyosis is a bit easier to understand and now it will help you a lot, Go and read that chapter. It's a very beautiful chapter, very properly written, very comprehensive, a bit dry and difficult to understand. And I hope that I've helped you in understanding this. And in order to do that, I've helped myself. Any comments, any doubts, put it in the comment section, in the suggestion queries with a timestamp so that I know that you're talking about this, or you can email me, but I prefer the comment section. With that, before that I go, next week there will be a special announcement. I hope I'll be able to complete it, but we'll talk about it next week. So without much further ado, I hope you and your family and your friends have a proper, safe and prosperous Diwali. Wishing you all happy Diwali once again. I think I'll write here, happy Diwali. I think I did the same last year for Diwali. So happy Diwali, and let me make a very rudimentary lamp. Okay, so lamps. Okay, no, please, no crackers. I know you're going to post it anyway, but no crackers. So happy Diwali. Without much further ado, bye bye. Enjoy, stay safe. Happy, safe Diwali. Happy, safe Diwali. Bye bye.